reality is evolving to higher and higher levels of complexity, but complexity is but a dull and non-descriptive and understated and inaccurate word for what is actually intimacy. Reality evolves to higher levels of intimacy, of intimate relationship between parts, which are more complex. But complexity is but the exterior description. There's more interconnections. But the interior of interconnectivity is intimacy. The interior of complexity is intimacy. Reality is ever more unique, ever more intimate, right? Ever more inclusive. Reality moves, right? In the scientific structure of reality, reality moves to ever higher levels of mutuality, recognition, union, and embrace. Reality is producing ever greater intimacies, parts coming together, forming new wholes that are greater than the sum of the previous parts, a new emergent, a new configuration of intimacy that didn't exist before. Now, what drives every evolutionary breakthrough is a crisis. And it's always a crisis in relationship, or what we might call a crisis in intimacy. So in evolution, at every stage, there's a crisis, an evolutionary crisis, which is a crisis in relationship. It's a crisis in intimacy, which then generates a higher level of intimacy, a new possibility. There's a gorgeous vision, which we see just in a particular snapshot, where protozoa that are unable to feed go high and low towards the light and towards the bottom to find food. But when they run out, both high and low, they come back towards the center. They're attracted to each other, and they actually create this exchange, this erotic, symbiotic exchange, where they exchange, right? They create a new structure of relationship, a new intimacy that allows them to survive and to grow. And they each actually learn from each other, and a new possibility is formed. But even more basically, more structurally, single-celled organisms, when they can't survive anymore because there's an oxygen crisis, because they're being poisoned by the oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere, they learn a way to create a new structure of intimacy, which is actually the move from single-celled life to multi-celled life, from unicellular to multicellular, from prokaryotes to eukaryotes. But that's a huge movement. That's what happens every step of the way. Every step of the way, from a clan, like, to a tribe, right, to a kingdom, right, there's always a crisis in intimacy. There's a crisis of relationship, then a new structure of intimacy, a new form of relationship is created. And actually, the entire evolutionary process, from elementary particles coming together to form stars, all the way through the cellular world, and then into, right, the more advanced plant world, and the animal world, and the mammalian world, all the way to hominids, to the human world, the actual movement is new configurations of intimacy that are generated by a need, by a crisis, by a breakdown, which motivates a breakthrough. My dear friend and the co-chair of our think tank, Barbara Marx Hubbard, loves to say, and says it beautifully, crisis is an evolutionary driver. That's exactly correct. At this moment in time, one of the core crises in intimacy, just to see how it plays out right now, is our relationship to gender. Because intimacy means intimacy with other, right? Intimacy is always a relationship to other, the ability to create a shared identity with other, right? Intimacy is shared identity in the context of otherness. We don't fuse, but we actually create a larger whole. And intimacy is also not just intimacy with all things, intimacy with all parts of myself. And there's this experience in the world where people feel like, well, I'm not intimate with myself. I feel alienated in some fundamental way. And that is expressed in part by the transgender movement. Now, you can critique the transgender movement, and it deserves critique like any movement. And figures, for example, like Jordan Peterson, right, have roundly critiqued the transgender movement as a kind of aberration of postmodernity. That's not quite right. Actually, the transgender movement is asking an important set of questions. And critiquing is important. I critique all the time. We got to see where it's flawed, where it's overstating, where it's overreaching, where it's ignoring the fact, where it's misstating the facts. But we also have to see, where is it right? And no one is smart enough to be entirely wrong. Right? So actually, I've got to see, what are they saying that's right? What have they got? And they got something really important. What the transgender movement understands is that there's something underneath gender. I'm not just boy. I'm not just girl. What's happened is we've deconstructed all narratives of identity. I'm no longer a Frenchman or a German or an American. I'm no longer Jewish, Catholic, Irish, or Protestant. That is to say, neither religion nor nationality are for much of the world sufficient to exhaust their need for identity. Right? Those old identity structures are breaking down. Family, in many ways, doesn't exhaust people's need for identity. Marriage doesn't exhaust people's need for identity. There's this growing leading edge movement where my profession, my skill, doesn't exhaust my need for identity. All the classical structures of identity have been weakened greatly, sometimes wrongly, and sometimes absolutely correctly. But there's been a deconstruction of identity. All of the old narratives of identity are breaking down. So what's left? It's a boy. It's a girl. When a person's born, right, we don't say, oh, it's a new Christian. There's a new little Jew. We love that little Jew. I'm Jewish, so I get to say stuff like that, right? It's a new Chinese, right? It's a new Lutheran. Oh, new Lutheran's there. Now, we used to do that. That was actually, right? That's actually how we understood reality. Now, it's not that that's wrong, right? Ethnocentric identity is beautiful if it doesn't limit you, right? A new member of the Jewish people, a new member of the Catholic tribe, beautiful and new Navajo, gorgeous, right? A new member of Confucianism, gorgeous. But we get in our bodies, right? In the cellular structure of our interior, that's insufficient. So what's the one dimension of identity that we feel like, oh, that's for real? It's a boy, it's a girl. What we do then is, we then put the entire weight of identity, the only certain identity we have is, it's a boy, it's a girl. And the transgender movement says, no, that's not right. I'm more than a boy. I'm more than a girl. There's something underneath my boy. There's something underneath my girl. I refuse to have my identity exhausted at boy or girl. So that's one. Two is, I feel like I got a lot of girl in me, even though I'm a boy. And I feel like I got a lot of boy in me, even though I'm a girl. So there's two perceptions, there's two brilliant intuitive insights of the transgender movement. We got to tease them apart. One is, there's something underneath gender. One, there's a deeper identity. Two, I'm not exhausted by one of the genders. Those are two distinct and correct and gorgeous understandings. The problem is with the solution. The solutions that the transgender movement offers are, to major an understatement, less than adequate. So first, well, if gender is not deep enough, right, to define my identity, how will switching gender help? I'm still going to be locked in gender. Oh, I was a boy, now I'm a girl. Now I've got all the girl problems. Number one. Number two, what I do is I collapse my meta identity crisis. I collapse my meta identity crisis into a gender dysphoria identity crisis. So I'm 13 years old and I'm a girl. I'm 14 years old and I'm a boy. And I'm feeling all the angst and all the raging hormones and all of the anger at my parents and all of the dislocation that I might feel as a Western teenager. And I'm not sure what to identify with. I'm not sure what to identify it with. So 25 years ago, I might have rebelled against the church because that was my identity. And that's what happened. There was a huge rebellion against the identity of religion. But since that identity in much of the modern, postmodern world has broken down, I can't rebel against that anymore. So what am I going to rebel against? The one remaining identity. It's a boy, it's a girl. So here I am, 14 years old, and I want to slice my breasts off. Here I am, 14 years old. I've got this enormous sense of identity crisis. I project the entire identity crisis on my girl nature, and I come to my parents and say, I want to have my breasts removed. I'm 14. What should my parents do? And it's a very big deal. I know several people, several good friends who have daughters, who have come to them and said they want to do gender transition surgery, and they want to start with top surgery and then go to bottom surgery. Well, what happens when you wake up at 23, right, and you actually realize, oh, I was actually having an adolescent identity crisis, and these parents, 3 out of the 4, went to, in the Bay Area, in San Francisco, they went to local psychologists who all counseled them to encourage their children and to support them. Whoa! So we've got 14-year-olds and 15-year-olds who are not old enough to give sexual consent, but who are old enough to initiate a process of gender transition surgery? What does that mean? So there's enormous confusion. And what we need to actually realize is 2 things. 2 great realizations that literally change the game, can save enormous amount of suffering, and generate literally new structures of intimacy that are so gorgeous and so stunning and so accurate scientifically, both in terms of the interior sciences and the exterior sciences. Number 1, underneath my gender, there's a deeper identity. I'm a unique self. I'm a unique configuration of intimacy, desired by all of reality. Reality is having a Christina experience. Reality is having a Nate experience. And Nateness and Christina-ness and Ericness is not just boy or girl. That's a dimension of that identity. But I am true self, meaning I'm indivisible from the field of reality. I am consciousness. Right? I am living, vibrating, unique consciousness. I'm a unique configuration of intimacy. I'm a unique set of allurements. And I'm irreducibly unique, meaning I'm not just a byproduct. I'm not just a side effect of my life, right? Most people experience themselves as incidental side effects in their own life. And I'm a side effect of my social conditioning, my psychological conditioning, my cultural conditioning. Who wants to be a side effect? Right? I'm not just a byproduct of my social, cultural, and psychological conditioning. I'm actually a self. But my self is not desiccated. It's not separate from. It's a unique expression of the larger field of consciousness, but not just the larger field of consciousness, the larger field of allurement, the larger field of desire, right? The larger field of intimacy. I'm a unique configuration of intimacies. I'm a unique set of allurements. I'm a unique structure of desire intended by all that is. That's an identity. That's underneath boy, and that's underneath girl. Now we go the second step, and it's gorgeous. One expression, a key expression of my unique self is the unique configuration of masculine and feminine that live in me. Now let's be very careful here. Not the unique configuration of man-woman, but of masculine and feminine. But by masculine and feminine, we don't mean cultural constructs that are assigned to masculine and feminine. We mean qualities of reality. So in some sense, you might say Bali, feminine. London, masculine. We call those qualities, those energies, those dimensions of reality, lines and circles. They're geometric. They're structures of reality. They exist before sex. They exist in the first nanoseconds of the Big Bang. You've got 4 forces in the world. You've got the electromagnetic and the gravitational, which are forces of communion, of allurement, of drawing closer. And then you have the strong and the weak, and the nuclear, which are agentic, agency, autonomy. Those structures of reality live all the way up and all the way down. Now, at some point, they express themselves in culture through masculine and feminine. So that's a gorgeous and beautiful expression, but it doesn't mean that the masculine is autonomous, meaning men are autonomous and women are about communion. No, it means that these qualities of lines and circles at certain moments in culture live in particular ways in men and women and live hormonally, right, in men and women. Oxytocin, circle, O, which is a lovely coincidence of cosmos, right, is circular. It's communion. It's a bonding hormone. Testosterone is a thrusting forward. It's a penetrating hormone. That's actually a hormonal distinction. Now, those hormones, though, don't define a Venus-Mars world, in which you're either Venus or Mars. Actually, both men and women have oxytocin and testosterone. And the level of oxytocin and testosterone that you have is actually interpenetrated with how you live in the world, right? So there's this interpenetration. So reality is lines and circles, all the way up and all the way down. Lines and circles live in every man and every woman. I have a default, which is my man and my woman, and those are not the same. It's not androgyny. This is not androgyny. It's very clear in science today that there's a masculine brain and a feminine brain. We did not know that, right, 30, 40 years ago. There are dozens and dozens of studies that make it beyond clear that anatomically, not just hormonally, but anatomically, there is clear distinction, clear, vivid, powerful distinction. And in treating depression, and in treating autism, right, and in treating an entire series of critical ailments, we actually need to understand the distinction between the brains because we treat them differently. So to not understand that distinction is to cause massive suffering. It's very clear we thought 30, 40, however many years ago, brain was pretty much neutral, step one. Step two, we realized, no, there's actually a male brain and a female brain. That's actually real. But then we realized something else. We realized that the brain is not static. The brain is part of evolution. The brain itself evolves. The brain itself is what we call today neuroplastic. And by neuroplastic, we mean that culture, environment, values, belief, intention, all of that actually reconfigures the structures of intimacy within the brain, rewires, right, the neural circuitry, changes the way the neural circuits cross synapses, and on and on. So there are two great facts. One, there's actually a very real man and woman. That's real. There are real distinctions besides the fact that women lactate and women bear children. And men have more upper body strength, which are exterior givens, but there's a huge hormonal field, which is vastly different and creates a vastly different experience. And there's a huge anatomical distinction, male and female brain. However, that's not the end of the story. Neuroplasticity, that is to say, the other core new emergent scientific fact, that I actually can evolve. I can start with a default man with lots of what we might call line qualities, with some very real circle qualities, but still a very dominant hormonal anatomical structure of man. And then, as I interact, as I develop, I might actually access more and more of my circle qualities. And I might integrate them in a particular way. And so my lines and circles will integrate in a particular way. For 98% of the people in the world, they'll have a core default birth gender, which is real. And then they'll integrate in all sorts of ways the other dimension, the other gender that actually lives in them genetically, anatomically, or hormonally. But what's going to happen is they're going to integrate in a way that's unique. That is to say, I'm going to be a unique configuration of intimacy. I'm going to be a unique configuration of lines and circles. Lines and circles are going to come together with me uniquely. And there are about 10 qualities of line, and there's about 10 qualities of circle that are actually qualities of cosmos that live more prominently lines in men/masculine, circles more prominently in women/feminine, but we then evolve. And we evolve beyond the male and female brain into what research is now calling the intersex brain. What is birthed in the intersex brain is the exterior expression of what I want to call unique gender. Right? Unique gender is the unique interpenetration of lines and circles that live in me, but it's not just the balance of my masculine and feminine. It's not just balance. It's that actually the lines and circles, the line and circle qualities come together in me in a way that's irreducibly unique. I am literally a new configuration of intimacy. My unique self is a unique gender. My unique self is a unique gender because lines and circles come together in me in a way that they never did ever in the history of reality, and they never will again. So my unique self, expressed in part through my unique gender, is not simply a balance of masculine and feminine, it is a radically new emergent. I am a new emergent. What's a new emergent? A new emergent means that parts, line and circle, parts come together to form a new whole, my unique gender, which is a subset, an expression of my unique self, which is unlike any incarnation, any expression of the love, beauty, and love intelligence that initiated all of reality that ever was, is, or will be. That's who I am. Right? Who am I? I'm unique gender. Unique gender is an expression of my unique self. What's unique gender? The unique interpenetration, calibration, right, integration of lines and circles living in me that are not merely balance, but a unique emergent, unique gender. So the response to the transgender challenge, which is gorgeous and beautiful, is not to switch genders, right? Not to slice my breasts off at age 16. And if you're one of that small group of people that actually, right, needs to do gender transition, blessings, honor to you, devotion to you. But that is not true for the overwhelming majority of people. That's obviously not true. And if it is true, right, wait a few years to make sure it's true, right? Because you're playing with your body, right? And once you've done gender transition, right, detransitioning is not at all easy. So actually, let me embrace my gender, but not as just boy or girl. Boy or girl is the beginning of the story. Let me actually integrate, embrace uniquely the line and circle qualities as they live in me and realize I am unique gender. So the crisis of intimacy, which is the transgender movement, has actually generated, like it always does, because our crisis is a birth. Crisis is an evolutionary driver, a new structure of intimacy, unique gender. That's gorgeous.